Okay, so in which area could the NAP Global Support Program add value to your national adaptation initiatives or strategies?
I think the NAP Global Support Program is can assist us in a lot of ways, especially because right now Bhutan has just about to start the NAP process. Firstly, in terms of capacity building, I think we have a lot of capacity constraints. Secondly, in terms of gaps in needs assessment, where are our gaps, what are the needs, also in areas of vulnerability assessment. So basically, I think that would pretty much cover a lot of the elements that are there in the elements A, B, C, and D of the NAP guidelines. So there are a lot of areas where the GSP could assist us.
What are the main entry points for NAPs in your country? For example, existing programs, projects, or institutions like climate change steering or technical committees?
We already have quite a lot of existing programs and institutions that the NAP could make their entry points in. In terms of programs, we have this program called the Mainstreaming Environment, Climate and Poverty, which is actually the lead is taken by the Planning Commission in consultation with the Environment Commission and other sectors. So that's one big entry point because we already started on the climate change mainstreaming, so NAPs could come in there. In terms of projects, I think we had some really good experiences from NAPA, so that's where they can build on as well, because NAPA is looking at short term, so going on to medium and long term, that's a place where people can start thinking of moving into the medium and long term plans. In terms of plans, we have the 5-year plans that Bhutan works on. Currently, we have the 11th 5-year plan that's ongoing, and actually one of the key areas that has been identified as a national key result area is the climate resilient development. So again, that's where adaptation could come into the picture. In terms of institutions, as I just mentioned, the Planning Commission plays a key role in mainstreaming environment, climate and poverty into the 5-year plans. That's one institution. Also, we don't have a ministry for environment. What we have is the commission, the National Environment Commission, and this commission is actually chaired by the Prime Minister, and we have other ministers also on board as members, and they are actually the high-level climate change committee. So any decision, major decision on climate change would go to this commission for approval. That's one committee that could take lead. Also, we have the technical level committee. It's called the Multi-Sectoral Technical Committee on Climate Change, and it involves a whole range of sectors, the civil society organization, private organization, and they do a lot of technical work on the climate change issues in Bhutan, so that's also another entry point. In terms of the local government, I think we have what we have called the Local Development Planning Manual. It's a very simple manual for the local planners, and probably we can incorporate issues of adaptation into this manual as well.
What capacity gap exists in terms of individual and institutional capacities in terms of developing and implementing a national adaptation plan?
I think the biggest challenge, first of all, in terms of capacity is still a lot of people, both at the national and the local level, their understanding of climate change, the science of climate change, the impacts of climate change and adaptation to it. I think the understanding is still very, to some extent, for some people is very minimal. I mean, some people understand it, but they still need a lot more capacity development in that area. Another issue becomes integration. We are asking for integration of adaptation. So the whole idea of mainstreaming and integration has always been a challenge for a lot of institutions, for a lot of the planners. So again, asking them to integrate adaptation issues would become a capacity gap. Third, we have very limited climate data and information. So that really needs to be built up, especially if you want to take up vulnerability assessments and also to try and identify our gaps and needs. And lastly, in terms of coordination issues, sometimes sectors, when they make their plans, they work in isolation. So they may not really take on board the adaptation issues that need to be considered. So trying to get everybody on board and trying to plan that way would should also be one of the capacity gaps that we have currently.
Maybe just a last question. Do you have any best practice or something that you want to share? Any good experience so far under the NAP, for example, in terms of coordination, collaboration between ministries or departments, or I don't know, involvement of communities? Anything that you think could be relevant?
Sure. I think we had a very successful. The first NAPA project was a very big success. It was coordinated among 3 different departments. And it was a 4-year program, and they had to work a lot with the communities. The project was on reducing impacts from cloth, so they had to work with communities, train them on early warning systems, what they do in terms of disaster management. So I think that was a good example, because the communities worked together with the government on this. Communities also worked in, one of the outcomes was to reduce the risk from cloth, and they actually had to manually reduce the level of one of the potential cloth risk lakes, and communities worked together with the government on this as well. So I think that was a very successful project, and we are about to embark on the second NAPA project, and it involves even more stakeholders, even more sectors, and it's also involving civil society organizations, so that will be something to look into as well in the future.